Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Josh Metzel, the Northern Colorado State Chair for Young Americans for Liberty and a student at Colorado School of Mines. Well, Josh, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Brendan. I'm so glad to be back.
In a previous interview, Josh, you explained your fight to end mandatory meal plans at Colorado School of Mines, and you have an update for us to give us the latest on that. But you're also going to share this new battle you're involved in for free speech on campus. So let's get started with following up on that meal plan. What can you tell us about what happened there?
So when we last spoke, we had made it clear that we had achieved our goals with the meal plan, saved students thousands of dollars a semester. And if I can just set the record straight, we celebrated it a little bit too soon. The way we had pursued our policy change was we had delivered a petition to the school administrators after marching, and they said that they would deliver it to the board of trustees. Immediately after we delivered the petitions, we started emailing saying like, "Hey, when can we see our petition added to the board of trustees meeting agenda?" And eventually they got back to us and we saw that, oh, yes, there's a Sodexo contract amendment uh, on the board of trustees meeting agenda. And we were hopeful and we waited for the board of trustees meeting to come. Eventually it came and passed. And then in August, a few months after the podcast episode that I was on last, the school revealed the meeting minutes and had exposed that the Sodexo contract amendment that we had celebrated over were it was actually an expansion of the school's contract with Sodexo. And so they made the mandatory meal plans more ingrained into the school and with a larger financial stake. So that's kind of a mess. But as Brendan mentioned earlier, there's a massive free speech fight, and that's actually an existential threat.
Wow, that's too bad. It was so exciting to hear that, as an activist, as a student, being able to get together, get petitions, set up tables, engage the student body to have a voice in your own education and be able to save these students so much money, thousands of dollars of these mandatory meal plans. And a lot of people don't know Colorado School of Mines does not require freshmen to live on campus. A lot of
That's actually not true.
did that
They
change?
are required to live on campus. It's been true since I was a freshman, and actually, the rumor is next year that they're going to be making housing mandatory for both freshmen and sophomore students.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I went to School of Mines, but many, many years ago, and just for a few years at least. And back then, yeah, you didn't have to be living on campus. And so many of my other friends who were going to CU or CSU had to stay on campus and have that extra cost. So that's pretty interesting to hear that they've changed that policy. My information was a little out of date there because it's been a while,
I wish
but
it was like that.
interesting. Definitely a way for them to get more revenue, it seems to me. They care about bringing more money into the college, of course. That's part of the whole thing with requiring students to stay on campus and these mandatory meal plans.
Yeah, I agree. It's a complete racket, and when you speak up about it, the school gets concerned and they start to crack down on your right to speak. So, our Young Americans for Liberty chapter at Colorado School of Mines over the past 2 semesters, we've been dealing with the school basically targeting us for speaking. So, when it comes to petitioning, I have been receiving emails from school administrators referencing how we have to get approval to petition and how we weren't doing that and how they're threatening our status with the school for not doing so. Same goes for tabling, same goes for booking rooms for meetings. All of that has to be approved by the school. And if we have a speaker, something pertinent, maybe something fresh, topical, controversial, we would be effectively unable to do that because we have to wait for the school's approval to have the event.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. You think of college campuses as this place where people can exchange ideas, get this freedom, and especially School of Mines being a little different than what people think of CU Boulder, right? So for them to really clamp down on this, I mean, do you think that this new speech, their public speech and freedom of assembly policy, is a direct response to your petition efforts?
I would say it absolutely is because one, we've been targeting their bottom line when it comes to the meal plan fight. And before that, it was the vaccine fight, which the school didn't really have a vested interest in nearly as much as they do with the profits they make from forcing meal plans. And I think because of that, and on top of the broader political climate around speech recently, there has been a narrowing in what we've been allowed to exercise our rights about.
Wow. So previously, you could set up a table on campus, your students there, right? You're paying tuition. You could set up petitions to activate the student body to talk to really try and create new policy changes or, have their voice heard by the administration. But now they don't want that to happen. They don't want the students to have a voice, of course, unless it's pre-approved. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I also think, like I mentioned on my last appearance, that it has something to do with not just us, but also the other political movements on campus, the leftists, the ones that are anti-war, anti a lot of these military-industrial contractors, who have not only donated to the school, but they have entire rooms named after them.
That's interesting. So what's that political atmosphere like at Colorado School of Mines? Are there a lot of students that are more liberal or left-leaning or, the pro-Palestinian types?
So I would say that there are definitely a lot of pro-Palestinian types and left-leaning students on campus. There are also surprisingly a lot of right-wing libertarian types. That's why Yala is successful at Colorado School of Mines. But really, I think the problem that the school has with all of that is that the people there are smart, they're active, they're going to, make an effort to make a change, and the school is scared because the change is effectively against their unfair system.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, you wouldn't expect this at Colorado School of Mines for a lot of people, but glad you're fighting. So, Josh, what's the thoughts on campus from the students? What do they think about this new free speech policy and assembly policy? Are there any opinions on that?
So for the most part, I think a lot of students are indifferent towards the new policy, primarily because if they're engaged in student life and clubs and organizations like that, most of the time they don't really have any problems because they're not political. They just fill out the forms that they need to, and there's not really a question about whether or not it's going to be approved. But with something controversial and debatable nature about ideas, some administrators, I think, are more harsh towards us potentially than other groups based on ideas. And the school has said, and I have it recorded such, that the intention behind the policy of approvals for speech is in case that we encounter people whom we disagree with, so the school can control the nature of that encounter, which is really majorly contrary to the philosophy of free speech, and especially on university campuses, which are supposed to be intellectual melting pots.
Definitely. I mean, it's a taxpayer supported institution, right? I mean, it's a public university. So, the fact that they think they can violate the rights of their students or infringe on the rights of their students to protect themselves from opinions that they find disagreeable is ridiculous. I mean, it's totally wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. And what's so interesting too is seeing how So yeah, at School of Mines, one of their biggest issues is they have libertarians. They have people who believe in liberty and freedom, and that's their biggest threat. So it's so interesting to see this happening here, and it's so unfortunate. Like you said, college is supposed to be this melting pot. It's supposed to be this place where people can get different ideas. But Josh, a lot of people might not know about Young Americans for Liberty. So what is Young Americans for Liberty? How do you describe it to people?
So, Young Americans for Liberty, I guess the simplest way to describe it is it's our only hope. All these crackdowns on our rights on college campuses, all the mandatory meal plans and silly stuff like that, that really we shouldn't be forced to engage in. Young Americans for Liberty is the only group I've ever heard of that is an organized effort towards ending that. And we care about people's rights. We care about people's liberties beyond college campuses as well. So we are a community of like-minded people. We have chapters on college campuses. We also have community chapters in a lot of different places around the country. We have YALCON. Some of you guys in the know might have heard of it, but we're going to the one in St. Louis. It's actually at the end of this week. Might be a little late to apply. You can go at yaliberty.org/apply. And if you can't make it to the St. Louis one, towards the end of April, there is going to be a Washington, D.C. YALCON. So
Nice, very interesting. Yeah, and so for Young Americans for Liberty, generally speaking, I mean, how many chapters are there across the United States? How many chapters are there in Colorado?
So I don't know across the entire country because that's a rapidly changing number, rapidly growing on might add. As far as Colorado goes, so we have the one at School of Mines. I actually found another state chair. I'm not going to name him for his privacy, but he was able to create a new chapter down south at CSU Pueblo.
Nice.
And he's been really, really successful there. So Colorado has been expanding on the YAL front. We've been doing a lot of legislative work, especially in this past season when it comes to gun rights. We've been testifying, even on green energy as well, to try and classify nuclear as green energy, so there's less red tape around that industry. Uh, we care about all the liberty issues, but right now, free speech is a threat to our existence at Colorado School of Mines, and I greatly, greatly urge the administrators to just please reduce the restrictions and the red tape. It'll make everyone's life a lot better.
Oh, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. Definitely appreciate the work that Young Americans for Liberty does, or YAL as people call it. Phenomenal stuff. And it's so exciting to see liberty minded young individuals in college campuses across Colorado, across the country, getting engaged, getting mobilized, and hopefully shifting that narrative a little bit. It's interesting. There's probably some more conservative type of people watching this who don't like all the left wing protests on college campuses. Maybe don't like what happened there in the '60s and this and that. But really, these attacks, these threats to free speech, affect people who believe in liberty too, just as much as they might affect people who believe on the other side of the spectrum there. So I think that's such an interesting point, and I think that's something that hopefully people take away from this is that people do need to pay attention to the universities here in Colorado for their infringements on free speech, and even a school like Colorado School of Mines it seems to be, in my opinion, guilty of violating the rights of their students. It's absolutely wild. So I really appreciate your efforts. What else do people need to know?
Well, I would just like to say that you're absolutely right in that free speech, if it goes down somewhere, it goes down for everyone. And that even if it's against people you don't like, the minute you become the person that the person in power doesn't like, they're going to target you just as much. And so it's a very, very slippery slope. Um, for the people out there, my final message is that despite all these crazy changes going on college campuses, despite all of these infringements upon our rights everywhere, we should still have hope because Young Americans for Liberty exists. And there's a young generation of people who are being educated in the ways of liberty and how to actually make it a reality for everyone. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, Josh. I appreciate you joining us, even with some of the technical difficulties here.
So
Some added, some added visual effects for people to check out while they're watching. But yeah, I appreciate your efforts, Josh. Really, thank you for providing that update and keep up the good fight. So encouraging. Makes me very optimistic to see young people engaged in the fight for liberty and freedom. So keep up the good work, sir, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
thank you so much, Brandon.
Perfect. Take care.
You too.